Kato, remember when a couple weeks ago when we had Chief Gary Jenkins, who was the chief of police in Pullman and also at Washington State University? I asked him, hey, do you ever think about what if Kohberger committed this crime at the Washington State campus? And this goes to Dr. Cooper's here. If he had, he'd be in a different prison system. That'd be Washington. He's in Idaho. Do the states differ as far as their harshness, as far as what life is like in solitary confinement, and just how they're viewed in general by leadership in that state?
Absolutely. There is a movement today in corrections, and I'm not talking just about journalists and people who are critical of the prison system. I'm talking about commissioners of corrections in various states, wardens and such, are going to Norway to visit and see what they do with prisoners. They have a rehabilitation-centered program in Norway. And actually, the sentences in Norway are much shorter than the United States, and the recidivism rates are much lower. And in between those two things, between the crime and the recidivism, there is time in prison where prisoners are required to do rehabilitation, to have jobs. They're let out of the prison when they pass the security tests, and they work in the community in preparation for their release. Various states have sent representatives from high in their administration, including the commissioner or director, to Norway to study this system. North Dakota has set up a Norwegian system in the state. What they did is they enhanced rehabilitation programs. They do things like releasing people from solitary once they've proven with good behavior that they can get along outside. And then they give them a job as a mentor to someone who's still in solitary and needs to change their behavior to get out. They have jobs like that. They have more education. They do training so people will make it when they go straight. They'll succeed when they are released. And guess what? They've reduced the number of people in solitary confinement in North Dakota. And the violence rate in the entire prison system has gone down as a result. So there's one state. Washington happens to be sending people to Norway to look at their system. Oregon, Washington, Colorado, North Dakota, New York. And all of those states have enacted certain parts of the Norwegian rehabilitation strategy, and they've all seen good results of reduced violence in prison and reduced recidivism.
Okay, so on that topic, where does Idaho stand here? I take it they're no North Dakota, right?
That they're no North Dakota. I haven't actually followed Idaho specifically, but they're somewhere in the middle in the United States. There are harsher prison systems and easier. As you can imagine, Florida and Texas are very, very harsh prison systems. I think Idaho is closer to them than to North Dakota, but I don't actually know the details of the Idaho system itself.
Yeah, I'd find it hard to compare Norway to an American prison system, only because I think the crime here is more intense with gang. I don't know Norway, but I can't imagine Norway having a subways where people are getting pushed in, or I can't imagine Norway having like a Chicago downtown, south side of Chicago kind of crime. Because once again, I don't know Norway, but I don't know if they're like a gangland and high violence people. So I can't see what their prison system would be like.
Well, you know, all of these questions get more complicated when you go into details. Like you mentioned gangs. Gangs are a complicated and very varied phenomena. Some people are committed gangbangers for life, and they're into the drug trade and all that kind of thing. There are people like that. Some people join a gang for protection because they're afraid of being beaten, raped, robbed, and such when they're in prison. So they join the gang basically for protection in the prison. Now, when those people are given an opportunity, and certainly when they go free of prison, they're not any longer connected to gangs. They grow up, they get out of that kind of crime and that kind of culture. So there's a very mixed bunch of people involved in the crimes, in crime and in prison culture. So in prison, yes, and some states are more gang filled than others. And the gangs have a major effect, for instance, on the recreation yard. You always have to go in American prisons, you have to go stand by the people of your own race. Because if trouble breaks out and you're among a different race, you're going to get beaten first and possibly worse.
Yeah. You know, and I think that's why your point earlier was so good, because, you know, you almost look at it like if he thinks it's bad in solitary confinement, if he was in general population, he'd be fighting for his life or nervous about his life probably 23 hours a day.
Is he allowed his parents to visit at all?
I don't know. I don't know.
Is that part of it?
I don't know when it's in solitary confinement. I mean, you can let us know. I don't know what kind of rights they have as far as visitation.
I don't know. Visiting is significantly reduced in solitary confinement. You know, it's the duty of correction officers and correctional staff and administration to provide a safe place for people to do their court-ordered sentence. That is how the system works. There's a duty there. With someone like your guy, he needs special protection. He doesn't necessarily need protective custody, but some very smart custody officers and administrators need to be looking at his security issues and, for instance, moving him to a place where he's not in danger. Now, he's not the only person like that. There's lots of people. There's a huge stigma in prison against police officers, against child molesters.
Right.
Those people need to be protected. And so what prisons do, and they're very smart about this, the classification officers, they figure out a way to keep the people separate from those who might harm them. That needs to be done. I'm not going light on that.
Right.
However, you don't need isolation to do that.
Okay.